Oh boy. Hey everyone. Welcome to live number 9 for TTA Performance. Thank you for joining us here in December. 'Tis the season. Merry Christmas to everyone. Happy New Year. All right. It looks like we got a few people already joining in, and that's good. That's good. I know it's been a while since we've done a live. I didn't realize that so much time had gone by, and the fact that I didn't do a live after my car went 12s, high 12s in the quarter mile. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't do a live to address this. The last live that we had, car was running 1366. So we're gonna address some of that. I got my notes here of some other things to talk about. But before we get into the going 12s and running the 85 and all that good stuff. We'll go over a few small things. One of them being we offer gift certificates. We now have gift certificates available. So if you have that special someone, or, well, I guess you could tell family members and other people, friends, whatever, that for what to get you for Christmas, birthday, or whatever special occasion, that you can get gift certificates here from us. They're good for about a year. Any dollar amount that you'd like to do. And we can usually also email it. We don't have to send it to you via mail. You don't need the actual physical gift certificate. Just we can scan it and email it to you. So that was the first thing. We have those available. We'll probably address that at the end there too. Hopefully we get a few more people joining in soon. In the meantime, we'll go over we do have a new product that just came out. You might have seen it on the Facebook page for TTA Performance, and I will get it here. We now offer the turbo center section, brand new, for a stock turbo. And let's go over this because there were some questions that came up with this. When so far I've only posted it on the Facebook page. It's not even on the website yet. But basically what this is, it's a brand new center section for the 301 turbo. So we have a stock exhaust wheel on it, brand new casting for the center bearing housing. This back plate here for it's a good way to hold this. The back plate here for the compressor housing is billet, and it's brand new. And then we have a billet compressor wheel. Now, let's talk about this compressor wheel. Some people were like, oh, is it an upgrade? Kind of, sort of. It is not the normal upgrade that comes with all my other turbos that I offered, my complete turbos that I offer. This one here is actually designed to fit a stock compressor housing. This is made to be a direct replacement for your stock housings. All my other turbos, when you buy a complete turbo from me, whether it be the standard upgrade, my stage 3 or my stage 5, the compressor and the exhaust housing has been modified. The standard upgrade, the exhaust housing is not modified, but the compressor housing is machined because we're putting a larger compressor wheel in those turbos. That's why they're upgraded turbos. Now, I was getting a lot. What brought this about was that I'd get questions from people that wanted to buy a rebuild kit for their turbo. I don't like selling rebuild kits because there's a lot going on with this. I mean, between the fact that this is a precision balanced piece, you don't really, the minute you take off the compressor wheel, you might get things out of sequence or a clocking position where it was balanced. I mean, these things spin really fast. And I was always concerned about it not being in balance anymore. That's minor. The biggest thing is that most of the time, there's bronze bushings in here. That's your bearings that the shaft is actually riding on. So what ends up happening is that the bronze bushings will actually not fit the housing anymore, where they either slip, they spin, something happens that the bronze bushings, the bearings don't actually, or they get worn out so bad. I mean, I've had these where there's so much shaft play in them that the wheels and everything were just rubbing housings. But you could actually wear through the bearing and then wear into the cast iron. Well, if that happens, now the actual bearing housing is bad, you can't even do anything about it. The rebuild's not even going to take. If you're putting the new bearings in it from the rebuild kit and they just kind of fall in there, or they don't have good, they're not being retained in there very well, that's not going to work for you either. So that's one of the reasons why. The other reason is I've had this happen where a customer, they bought a rebuild kit for me. They took it all apart and found out that the shaft had been ground undersized because it was already a rebuilt unit. So the turbo had gone through a rebuild once already. They ground the shaft, they put bearings in it that were oversized, or I should say undersized, on the inside diameter. So instead of it being a 400 thousandths diameter shaft, it was like a 390 diameter shaft. Well, the bearings that came in the kit were 400. So it was way too loose to fit. And you really don't know until you take it all apart. So rather than running through all the problems and potential problems of doing a rebuild kit, you can buy this already done, and everything is new. Everything's new. And this is for the do-it-yourselfer that, I don't want an upgrade. I don't need anything. I'm just going to take it apart. I'll do it myself. Okay. This sells for $675 and there's no core. I don't need anything in return. So talking about the compressor housing, here's the compressor housing. Here we got your 3-bolt flange. This would mount onto the intake manifold. This would mount for your plenum, would attach to this for your carburetor. This is what I'm talking about. On my upgraded units, basically every complete turbo that I sell, this is machined. This is machined because the wheel is actually larger on my upgraded units. The beauty of this is that now we have a billet compressor wheel that is contoured and shaped to fit the stock housing. I'm going to actually try it. I haven't even done this yet. Oh yeah, look at that. Very nice. Very nice. So now, let me put this down. Technically, this billet compressor wheel is a little bit of an upgrade over the stock cast wheel. The stock cast wheel you can't purchase new anymore. So there is still some upgrade or better efficiency with this billet wheel, even though it's a stock size, stock compressor. So it is a little bit of an upgrade, I guess. But this is a new product. It's been a while since we had a new product, but I'm really excited about this one here because it gives us a little bit more of a cost savings alternative, because there's some people that, $1,350 for an upgraded turbo, complete turbo. Yeah, depending on what their goals are, they just want to get the car back together and get it working. Here's a more cost-effective alternative. So if you guys got any questions about that, let me know. Put this down somewhere where it doesn't get damaged. That'll work. Okay, who do we got? Loris. Oh, I think aren't you? Oh no, you're in Massachusetts. Yes. Good to see you too, sir. Ned Rocks. Hey, I haven't spoke to you in a while. Hope everything's going well with your car, Ned. So yes, we talked about the turbo that's available, and of course, guys, just go ahead and type in questions as we go along, and we'll answer those questions for you. So should we just go right into it then? The 12-second pass. I'm assuming you guys saw the video when we went out there. In the last live, I was actually skeptical of it actually going 12s. I was doing research based on what the gains would be from E85. And everybody's like, oh, another 30, 40 horsepower. Wow, that's a lot just from a fuel change. Okay. I started, I like going to the Wallace Racing website because they have an awesome automotive calculator section. So there's like a ton of different calculators on there to do different things. And so I went on there, I'd put in the information from the 13.6 time slip, guessed on the weight of the vehicle being around 3,750 pounds. And it told me how much rear wheel horsepower I was making. So I took that number and I added 30 or 40 horsepower, whatever it was, and had it recalculate the number. And it said it was going to go like 1309. And I was like, yep, that sounds about right. We're going to be on the ragged edge of running a 12 with it. So after doing the dyno tune, well, let's back up. So I decided to convert to E85, and running the Holly Sniper, I was able to do that. Basically had to change the tune, and I cheated. There's the basic Holly Sniper does not have the capability of having an alcohol content sensor in it, kind of like your flex fuel vehicles do, your newer cars. It doesn't have that capability. So I had to go in and fool it, and most of the time, the rule of thumb is about 30% more fuel is what you need to run E85, because E85 just does not have the same amount of energy per, I don't know what you want to call it, per gallon, per ounce, per whatever pound, as gasoline does. So I went in and told the Holly Sniper that nope, it's not a 301, it's a 390 cubic inch engine, and that just across the board put it at 30% more fuel. I was still running the AFR scale for gasoline, but it is a wideband oxygen sensor that is on the Sniper, and it's just running it through a calculator to show you a air fuel ratio number for gasoline scale. So I could just use the gasoline scale, even though I was running on E85 on alcohol. So after draining the fuel tank, putting in E85, told it was a 390, the computer is going to automatically adjust to meet my target air fuel ratios that I had set. And I just let it learn, and then just kept going back and taking all the information, all the learning information, and transferring it into my tune, the actual fuel map. And I was actually kind of amazed. I mean, it started right up on E85, and yeah, at first it was a little, wanted to stall, was kind of, having a few issues. But as I addressed those and kind of made some changes myself to the fuel map, it just got better. The amazing thing is that fuel is cold. It is really, well, I shouldn't say it's cold. It takes out a lot of heat. You need the heat. It's taking the heat to evaporate the fuel, and that's where you're getting these drops in temperatures, air temperatures. So I have my temperature probe in the intake runner of number 1. When I was at the drag strip, and I had relayed, I talked about this in the previous live, it went, I had 200-degree intake temps going into the cylinder head at cylinders 1 and 3 while making the 13-second pass. And I never heard detonation. The water alcohol injection system was on, and it was on 93 pump gas. I was like, wow, that was some really high temps. I was a little concerned about that. So then running the 85, I started driving the car around town just 35, 40 miles an hour and whatever. And those intake temps were just going down, like plummeting. And I was like, well, okay, it's just, the fuel going through the engine. It's, I'm not spooling up the turbo. The turbo's not building any boost to build it, so it's not building any heat. So then, you'd lay into the throttle and you get on it and build a bunch of boost with it. And those temps kind of, at 14 pounds of boost, those temps kind of just settled around 125 degrees, which that was a huge drop. What was really interesting was that the plenum was actually cold to the touch after driving the car. Engine's fully warmed up, temp is up, around 185 or so. It was a pretty warm day. I mean, it wasn't hot out, but it was a pretty warm day. And you could put your hand on it, and that big chunk of aluminum of that plenum felt like it came out of the refrigerator. And in fact, there was some humidity in the air that there was moisture condensing onto the plenum. It was so cold. It was actually sweating. Um, it was pretty wild. But with that being said, brought on a new problem. Um, you tend to have this cold plenum, and the fuel wants to evaporate, so it's looking for heat. And if it doesn't have enough heat to evaporate, it stays in a liquid form, and it starts to puddle in the bottom of the plenum. So when driving the car, you can see the air fuel ratio was just oscillating up and down as you're driving the car, uh, because it is starting to puddle down there. So I still have to experiment with this, but I was trying to get the coolant hose that goes to the plenum. We have that coolant hose that goes from underneath the thermostat and goes to the plenum to warm it up for cold drivability. Then the thermostat, that's why we have that special thermostat with that second spring and everything on the bottom. Once the thermostat would open, it would actually block off that passage, and there would be no hot water or coolant going to the plenum anymore. So I put a standard thermostat in it. Technically, I cut the bottom off of mine, trying to keep hot water circulating into the plenum to try to put some amount of heat into it to get the evaporation going and to be a little more stable at idle and things like that. So, um, something's not right on my car though. I got a feeling the passage in the plenum, there's a blockage somewhere because coolant was not flowing through there like it should. Uh, so I did have this kind of erratic idle, come to a stop. Things would go rich, things would go lean, and then it was kind of all over the place. But that is definitely something I want to address. In fact, what I want to do is put a standard thermostat in the car, have the coolant flow going all the time to the plenum, but actually put a ball valve in line so that I can adjust it and basically maybe just trickle in hot water versus having constant flow. So we're going to experiment with that more come next spring. But uh, yeah, on the 85, driving it around seemed the same to me. That's when we went to the dyno, and it didn't want any more timing. I tried to put, I think I put one more degree in, or a couple of degrees in it, but I think one more degree, I think I was at 25 degrees, and it made a difference. I went up to 26. It said no. It only made a very, very small difference. Um, I backed it down again and put it back where it was. So it didn't want any more timing than that. Um, it really wanted more boost. It loved to have more boost. I don't know how much further I can push it. um, it was at 17 pounds, 300 horse to the rear wheels, which is about 35 more than it was on 14 pounds and 93 pump gas. It yeah, it's a different animal. It's a completely different animal at that boost level. Um, it was, yeah. You never realize how it all of a sudden it starts putting you back in the seat, and you're like, I'm surprised that it's doing this, being a 301. So yeah, went to the track, slicked, put the drag radials on, first pass out. Actually, the first one, and we watched the video. I had set up a boost cut in the sniper in case it ever got out of control and the boost went too high, it would actually shut the injectors off. First pass, it hit that. It tried to spike to like 18, maybe even 19, because the weather was a little bit cooler than the day I was at the dyno, so it was starting. The air was more dense, so I was making a little bit more boost, and it shut off like twice down the track. It was for 60 feet, it was moving, and then it shut down. I tried to get back in it, and it shut down again. I'm like, no, it's not having it. Let's turn the boost down. Which now we have this awesome little uh, boost controller mounted on the dashboard, so I can just twist the knob inside the car and increase and decrease the boost, which is really neat. Um, so I turned the boost down a little bit. That's when I went out and made the second pass, and it went 1289 at 104, a little over 104, which was just phenomenal. Yeah, Jonathan, you saw in the video, Jonathan was super excited. right off the bat, went into the 12s. Let it cool down, made another pass. I mean, this car could be a bracket car. It went 1285 the next time. I mean, it's just, very consistent. Of course, I'm being consistent too. I was leaving pretty much on the same amount of boost every time. It was dead hooking. It wasn't spinning. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I know a lot of people didn't like the video in the fact that I was building boost at the starting line, even though light was green. I wasn't cutting any kind of a reaction time because the timer doesn't start until the car leaves. So I can sit there all I want with the light green, and I just wanted to make sure I was leaving with a steady amount of boost. I was ready to go, had everything where I wanted it, and launched pretty basically the same every time. But my opponent would always take off and be like halfway down the track. So a lot of people are like, they wanted to gauge the performance racing another car. We actually went, so I only made about 3 passes that night. There were some shutdowns on the track. People were, there was cleanup and stuff going on in between. And I was happy. I was like, the minute it went 1289, I was like, yeah, load it up. Let's just go home. I'm good. We actually went back the following week. During the week, Jonathan and I went out there, and I didn't realize that I had done it, but I must have turned the boost down. I think the weather was getting cooler, and it was building more boost because it'll denser air, and especially on the street. So I had turned the boost down. So then we go out to the track, and again, there was a lot of oil downs and whatever, and a lot of track cleanup. So it was just, we couldn't get hardly any runs in. First pass, it went 13.0. I'm like, that's kind of off. The mile an hour is down a little bit too. Maybe I didn't build enough boost on the starting line. So then I went around again, and then it went like 1290 something. And I'm like, what is going on? It's like 104, just over 104, where my 1285 was like almost 105. It was like 104.9 or something. And I was like, what the heck? And I was like, oh, I don't have enough boost. That's why it's down like a pound and a half, 2 pounds or something like that. I didn't get a chance to turn it up. The night had ended, but I did squeak out like another 1289 with it. One of the 60-foot times was the best ever with the car. So if the boost was where it belonged, it may have gone faster. But again, it was just dead consistent every time. It would just go down the track. It was interesting. I got to race a newer Dodge Charger, one of those 392 Hemi Chargers. And the guy was his first time at the track. He didn't know how to stage the car. I'm like waiting on him. I was like, well, this gives me an opportunity. They're trying to tell him, he had overshot the starting line to stage. So they're telling him to back up and everything. And I'm like, I'm just sitting at the starting line. I was like, I'll just stage, wait for him. By then I'll have my boost built up and everything. I'll be ready to go. By the time he stages and the lights come down, I'll leave with him, or I'll just try to cut a good reaction time and whatever. And I might have got a little bit of a jump on him at the light, but blasted down the track, and I got him by a car length, which I thought was awesome for, a newer 392 Hemi Charger. I was like, he went like 13.2, I think, which I was just like, man, that's pretty cool to be able to take on some of the newer cars. But no, it was a good time. It's kind of put away for the winter, I guess you could say. But yeah, who knows what's going to happen next year. I'm thinking gear change, maybe overdrive trans. Not sure where I want to go yet. I'm almost thinking of doing overdrive trans and leaving the 308 gear in it and see what happens. But of course, we're always going to be experimenting and trying more things. So who do we got on now? We're up to 11. Car's great. That's good to know, Ned. Paul Johnson, good to see you're on here. How's Rocky doing? Tommy, hey Joe, I just got my TTA Performance Christmas card. Thanks, say hi, and thanks to Heather Jonathan from Uncle Tommy. I will, Tommy. Thank you. What would happen if you used E85 without converting it to fuel injection? Good question. So if you don't change anything else on the carburetor, you got to richen it up. It needs more fuel. It needs about 30% more fuel to run E85 effectively. If you don't do that, it will actually run lean. So, and how do I know this? I converted the car. I put my car back on 93 pump gas right before winter. Um, and so I basically was driving around on E85 until it was pretty much empty. And I pulled in at a gas station. I filled the tank with 93 octane. I went into the handheld for the sniper, selected my 93 octane tune that was already saved in there, started it up, and there was still E85 in the fuel lines and injectors and everything. So at first, it was running really lean. It didn't want to idle because it was too lean. It didn't have enough fuel, so I kept it running a little bit. And then by the time I got down the road with it, I don't even think I went a mile really. It was running great. By the time all that fuel ran through the system and got rid of all the E85, it was running great. So you need to. It's very important that you have the extra fuel to go with it. Can you do that with a carburetor? I think you can. Um, I tried doing it and I just never got a chance to experiment with it. I had actually modified one of the original turbo quadrajets and made it. I was trying to do it a special way where I didn't want to go back into the carburetor and change jetting if I wanted to go back to pump gas. So what I was trying to do was mess with air bleeds instead, and made screw-in air bleeds for a Holly. I put those in the top of the carburetor and stuff. But first, I was trying to run it on 93 octane, which it kind of was working. This was with the old motor. The old motor was a big unknown, and it had blown a head gasket then shortly after. So I never did get to experiment with E85 in the quadrajet. I think it can be done, especially if you I never thought of it this way. You could technically make an E85 quadrajet, get that all tuned and dialed in, get the jetting correct, and then have a 93 octane carb sitting there and have two different carbs so you could switch back and forth. That'd probably be easier than changing jets. But yeah, I think it can be done. It's just you got to make the modifications necessary to the carb. Random Randy. Hemi hooray for the 301T. Thank you. Tommy, computer controlled injection system isn't required and you can do all adjustments mechanically. Yeah, you could probably do it mechanically to run E85. Sure. I mean, they make E85 carburetors in the drag racing applications out there. Even some of them are blow through carbs for boost. Ours is a draw through, so technically it's not, there's no boost in it. But William, hello from Sebring, Florida. Overdrive with 308 project would be very interesting to see how it does. Yeah, I might do that. I might do that first. Mainly because, honestly, I'll be honest, I like my 308s in the drag strip. Running 1285, and then, I mean, it was about at the shift point when I crossed the finish line. And now, granted, my drag tires are 1 inch shorter, so it kind of acts like a 323 gear because of the shorter tire. But even with my street tires on there that are stock 27-inch tall tire, you can't. We got 70-mile-an-hour speed limits here on our interstate, so trying to do 70 in a 301 turbo, even with 308 gears, it's not easy. I mean, it can do it, but it feels, I mean, you're approaching 3,000 RPM at that cruising speed. So that's why I think the overdrive would be interesting. The other side of it is the 204R has a little bit deeper first gear ratio than my Turbo 350. Turbo 350 has a 252 first gear. The 204R has a 274 first gear. So I would be getting even more gear technically off the starting line in first gear. And then I have the overdrive. I could take it, on cruises and, the longer distances probably where highway speeds wouldn't really be an issue. Maybe I'll do that first, and then later we'll switch over to 342s and see how much more of a gain, if any, there would be, for performance at the track and so on. Let's see. Random Randy, what stall converter do you have in the car? Right now, it has a 2,500 RPM stall converter in my Turbo 350, and the lockup feature is not working. I wish it did. That's the other thing I always wanted to try is to have the lockup work. some of the Grand National guys would actually take off, and then like after they ship second gear or something like that, they would lock the converter and then just go through the gears with the converter locked, which you're no longer shearing any more fluid. Uh, there's no more slippage. So you're locked directly, like if you were a manual transmission car. I wish I tried to get it working. Something must be wrong. Like I'm assuming it's the solenoid inside the transmission. There's something not right. Okay, Big Tex. You, sir, are a guru on a 301T. If I were to take my TA to you so you can do your magic on it, how can I get it to you? I live in Texas. Big Tex. I have a shipper that is local to me. Actually, I got quite a few customers in Texas. I almost thought about moving there. So I got a shipper here local to me. Lives in Kenosha. It's Mike at Premier Transport. He's got this beautiful 2-car enclosed trailer, gooseneck trailer. He loves to go to Texas because I believe his dad lives in Texas. I've got several customers in Texas that we've brought cars up, and actually my car's from Texas. And he goes back and forth from there. So yeah, definitely it's been done. In fact, I currently have a car here from California that I just finished up. And we'll get into that one a little bit too, as to some of the interesting things on that car. Yeah, if you're seriously interested, you can contact me. I'll give you the number for Mike at Premier Transport, and we can get the car shipped up here. Of course, we'll have to schedule it. We're kind of got a little bit of a waiting list right now. But just let us know in fact, if you want to tell me right now, what are you having any issues with the car, or just looking to get more performance out of it? Let me know. Tommy, Big Tex, this is what I did. My car spent some time visiting Wisconsin from California, and Joe did wonders. Thanks, Tommy. Yes, Tommy's in California also with an 80 pace car. Actually, we'll go right. Actually, I'm going to check. I think I got a text message here. Let's see if it's anybody. Oh, it's just Tommy. He's got the Christmas card. I love it. So I got an 81 Daytona 500 car sent to me from California, and it ran and drove. Customer had been waiting. He wanted to send the car to me. He had tried to bring it to a couple places in California, and he was telling me it's just not running right. He says it just barely idles when you try to start it up, and it just it wouldn't go up hills. He said it couldn't climb a hill. He brought it to a shop. They're like, "Oh, the catalytic converter's plugged," so they put another catalytic converter on it. Somebody else said, "Oh, the carb needs to be rebuilt," so they had a shop rebuild the carburetor. He says, and it was a little bit better, and then it would start to go up the hills and everything, but it still wasn't right. And he had a bunch of other issues with it. Okay, so we had it scheduled. Has the car delivered to me on an open trailer. Unfortunately, Mike from Premier Transport will not go to California. Open trailer came and dropped off the car. Right away, I noticed as it's getting unloaded, I see a sway bar is kind of bigger on the rear and kind of hanging down, and I see subframe connectors are under it. And by the time it comes off the trailer and is parked in the street, it's sitting lower. And I'm like, oh, okay, somebody did some work on this already. Windows are tinted. I opened the door, and the Recaro seat and the whole interior is redone. Been done a little while ago, probably. It wasn't fresh, but it was done in leather. So it has Recaro seats that are black leather with red leather in the middle, and it's not bright red leather. It's like a darker red leather, and it's like a perforated leather, kind of like C4 Corvette leather seats. I think C4s had like a perforated leather in them. And anyway, they got rid of the red carpeting. It has black carpeting in it. But they upholstered the back seat in leather to match the front seats, which I thought was kind of interesting. So somebody's been playing with this car, obviously. I brought the car in. It sat so low that my lift barely fit under the frame to raise it up. And then things really got interesting when I got it up in the air. It had a brand new catalytic converter. It had a stock downpipe coming off the turbo. It had a 3-inch pipe, single pipe, off the converter, going all the way back and starting to go over the rear axle, where it went into a cross-flow muffler between the gas tank and the rear axle, similar to what the third gens do. But I believe there was some second gen Firebirds that use that cross flow style muffler, but it was a single 3-inch. Well, I think they adapted it down then 2.5. Single in, dual out, and then the dual out obviously had the splitter tips at the rear, and they were kind of pointing down at. They were very short. You could barely see them coming out of the quarter panel. Had an aftermarket, I think it's a Hotchkiss rear sway bar, which does not use the factory mounts. It doesn't have those strut rods that go up to the trunk floor. So I started looking at it a little bit harder. I'm like, somebody's made some modifications, obviously. And then I looked at the transmission and I was like, what is the deal with this transmission? I've never seen a transmission pan that looked like this. And it's an automatic. And I started studying. I'm like, it's not the 204R because that's got a really special pan on it. This just looked like a cake pan. It was like perfectly rectangle. Wasn't square like a Turbo 350, but I'm like looking. I'm like, something's different. What transmission is that? Cross member was moved back. I'm like, I bet you that's a 700R4. How did you get a 700R4 behind a Pontiac? They're all Chevy bolt pattern, the bell housing pattern. I'm like, oh, there must be an adapter plate coming off the back of the block. So I go and I look a little bit closer. Nope, there's no adapter plate. It's bolted directly to the Pontiac engine. Then I look back a little ways, probably about, I don't know, 5 inches or so, 6 inches or so off of the flange. And you can see a bead of weld around the bell housing. So this bell housing was actually cut, and a Buick Olds Pontiac bell housing, maybe from a Turbo 350, I would assume, or maybe a Turbo 400, whatever, was welded onto the transmission to make it directly bolt onto the Pontiac engine. That was, I mean, it looked really good. The welds looked amazing. I'm assuming it was a professionally done thing. It was fixtured and all this stuff, because I'm like, how do you get like the input shaft aligned and the spacing correct for the torque converter? I mean, I wouldn't want to do it. But it had a 700R4 in it. And I'm like, oh boy, if it's got a 700R4 in it, odds are it's got a different rear gear in it. And he was already complaining that the speedometer was off. The speedometer was not accurate at all. So dug into it. I didn't even pull the differential cover. I just marked the drive shaft, marked the tire, spun it. Yep, almost 3 3/4 turns, which would be a 373 gear. So we have a 700R4, 373 gears. Okay, do I even want to open the hood? Opening the hood, it was all stock, except the entire 81 air cleaner, lid and base, was chrome plated. It was pretty interesting. Just the whole air cleaner was chrome plated. He did have somebody do some brake work on it, and that was one of his complaints, was that the brakes didn't feel right, the pedal didn't feel right. We did some adjustments on the rear calipers. It had the wrong tachometer in it. It had like a 78 style tachometer, which he wanted to put a boost gauge in it anyway. So I got him the correct tachometer for the car, put the boost gauge in it. His gauges weren't working. Oil pressure gauge was pegged way past 80 PSI. The actual printed, I call it the printed circuit, that laminated circuit on the back of the gauges, that was screwed up, which is common. Replaced that, then all the gauges started working, fixed all the lights. Somebody actually had the check engine light bulb, which is on a separate wire. It's not part of the laminated circuit. The bulb for the check engine light is hardwired into the rest of the harness for the ECM. They had that in the brake light socket. So I went to check codes with this thing, and it was flashing the brake light at me, which I thought was funny. Got all that straightened out, check engine light, got that all worked out. Ended up putting a heater core in the car, which, oh man, those are never fun on those. Put a blower motor in it, things like that. So what's wrong with the car? Why is it running so bad? Somebody rebuilt the Quadrajet, and the first thing I look at, I pull the carb off and I'm looking at it, and the first thing I notice is that the choke pull-off is bad. It's not even holding a vacuum. Okay, it needs a new choke pull-off, which if the choke pull-off's not working, maybe the choke's staying on, it snaps shut, it's not going to get enough air, it's going to load up really bad. We did do a tune-up on it, probably because I was afraid that it fouled out the spark plugs from so much fuel, so I had a full tune-up done to it, check the ignition timing, make sure it was right. That was another issue. Ignition timing was set to 0. It was supposed to be 6 because it's a computer controlled car. It was set to 0. Got the timing turned up where it needed to be. The electronic spark control box was acting up, so we had to bypass it. That's probably somebody tried setting the timing with the spark control still trying to control it. That's probably why it was off. Got that all figured out. Hey, it's running better. Went through the carb, checked the float, checked this, put a new accelerator pump in it, one from Cliff Ruggles. He's got the best accelerator pumps, period. Did it all up, put it back on. Hey, it's running so much better. It's idling nice, all this stuff. Take the car for a ride. Yep, it's starting to build better boost, but it still has a flooding problem if it sits for 10 minutes. I'd shut the car off and I went to move it and I had to hold my foot to the floor, clear it out. It was loading up. I'm like, this is not right. What is going on? You would look down the carburetor after you shut it off and you would actually see dripping coming out of the booster. It would look like the booster on the primary side, but just on the passenger side one, the driver side one wasn't doing it. But I'm like, what could be causing? I mean, I've seen dripping out of the booster when the car's idling because they got the curb idle screw turned up too high or something else is going on, that there's a really strong vacuum signal and it's trying to pull it through the booster, but not when the car shut off. So I call up Cliff Ruggles over at Cliff's High Performance, asked his opinion. I was like, hey, I've got one that's kind of stumped me. He's like, check this, check that. He goes, but that's really odd. Why would it be doing that when it's shut off? So I took it all apart again and started looking at it a little bit closer. And when I flipped it over underneath, the backside of the booster, the casting there was actually some large porosity holes there. And that it was basically just the float bowl was just dripping fuel into it. Even when it was running, it was doing it, which I did see that, but I knew that wasn't right either. So I epoxied up those porous holes and cured it. It was all good to go. Starts up every time, runs beautifully, goes into high idle with the choke on, kick it down. Car's making 10 pounds of boost. I got it set at 10 pounds of boost with water alcohol injection on it. And it's actually pretty cool. I mean, it shifts hard from first to second. And if you get on it right away in first, it'll hit second gear and make some boost. And it actually tries to keep the tires spinning. But it's definitely a fun car. I mean, it works out. They're just so much more fun when they run the way they're supposed to. But that's been the ongoing project. That one's all done. It's going to be getting picked up here soon. But that was a really long story for you guys, I guess. Oh, let's answer some more questions. Paul Johnson, Rocky is good. It's peeing at hard throttle, so I'm trying to troubleshoot that. Okay. With the colder air, if you got, I know you're out east, colder air, it might be making more boost because the air is more dense. So you might have to turn the boost down. That could be what's going on. And then, of course, we have the whole fuel issue of, do you have high enough octane in it? Is the water injection, is the bottle full? Make sure that you didn't run out of run out of washer fluid. Just a couple things to check, but it might be that you're making a little too much boost now with the colder air. Big text. Yes, please, on the transportation information. I stored it for 3 years. Hasn't been driving. I start the car once every year. Car needs a bit of everything except the boost light stopped working. Oh, example, the boost light stopped working. Okay. Yeah, we can take care of that for you. I just need your magic touch for mechanical and performance to bring the car back to its glory. You bet, we can take care of that for you. Feel free to, I'm assuming you've been to the website, hopefully, TTAperformance.com. Give us a call or send me an email, and we can discuss it even further. I'll throw the number out there. It's 262-818-4029. Let's see, Tommy, can we buy a TTA zip-up hoodie you have on? Yes, you can. Oh, another one with the hoodie question. We have pullover hoodies that we can have made. Really, I wish I could start offering more of the apparel. But I know I'm gonna get like swamped with that stuff. It's so hard to to maintain that and manage that. And I know the wife's not gonna want to do that either. But no, we'll do it on I mean, if you guys want t-shirts, hoodies, stuff like that. Just, email, phone call, whatever. We can get that stuff. Or we could do different colors too. I think one of the other times I had a gray t-shirt with a black logo. I know some guys don't like to wear black because summertime it gets hot. But yeah, zip up hoodies, they're available. On the way. Oh, tell Heather to get to work on that. She's probably listening, Tommy. Oh, Ned Rocks would want one too. Okay. I should get some pricing on that for you guys. Oh, wait, she's shouting at me. What was that? There's a delay. Oh, wait. Oh, Tommy, she said no. You'll have to talk to her. Let's see. Brent Taylor. Hey, sorry. That's okay, Brent. Just you could always replay these if you guys didn't already know that. Once these lives are done, they get posted up to YouTube, and you can go back and watch them. Tell her to hush. Oh, but yeah, the big text. That's something we can take care of for you. Did you say? I gotta look back. Was it an 81? I'm sorry, I didn't see. Oh, Tommy, you got her attention. She came in here now.
Tell him brewer tickets speak a lot.
Oh, you want to go to spring training, don't you? Oh, Tommy, you hear that? Spring training for the Brewers.
That's Arizona.
So it's a lot warmer in here. Oh, let's see. Yeah, I don't think Tex. I don't think you told me what year it is. Oh, okay. What year's your car, Big Tex? Oh, so what else? And let's see. So what do we got going on for projects right now? So right now we got a really interesting one. I think, and I kind of hinted to it on the Facebook page. I'm trying to do some YouTube for it, but the filming that I started doing on it, it's not the best. Maybe I can make something out of it. I don't know. I'll try. But it's a 78 Macho TA. You may have heard me talk about it on some of the past lives. It's so for those that don't know, there is a special edition. I don't want to call it special edition and confuse it with a Bandit car. There is a super tuned dealership tuner car that was available in the late 70s on the Trans Am. It was a dealership. It's similar how like Yanko was doing cars for Chevrolet, and you had Baldwin Motion and stuff like that. So there was a dealership in Arizona that was Meckham Pontiac, and the brothers, their dad owned the dealership. So the two brothers, Dennis and Kyle, started doing these like specialty tuner packages on Trans Ams, and they were called Macho TA. It said Macho TA really big on the bottom of the door, kind of similar to like a Formula. Special paint, and they would kind of install performance stuff on the cars for you. It was kind of, you could build it to suit. Some of the cars were built and put on the dealership lot. They were sold as a used car to get around the whole emissions thing, but they started in 77 with a handful of cars, and then 78, 79, and 80. Now, you may have seen me talk about it before. In 80, they did the 301 turbo. But there was only, and I'm going to get this wrong, and then Barry's going to be upset with me. I think there was 5 or 6 in 80. I keep saying 6, but then I keep seeing people, Barry post 5 of the 80 301 turbo. Barry's got number 4. I worked on number 4. There was nothing done mechanically to them. By then it was mainly an appearance and maybe suspension. But anyway, 78, they made, I believe, 204 of them. They're all numbered. Out of the 204 78 Macho TAs, they did a lot with HO Racing and I believe VSE, which VSE was that was done by Herb Adams. And they were just installing these parts. They had a catalog like, okay, how do you want to build your TA? What parts do you want us to install? They had the chrome bolt-in roll bar from Hooker was available. There was different shifters. They were cutting the front springs and lowering them, putting Coney shocks on them, changing gear ratios. I mean, you can go as crazy as putting a Doug Nash 5-speed in it if you wanted to. But like I said, a lot of the stuff was coming from HO Racing, and they built the HO Racing had a Turbo Force kit. I don't know how many people are familiar with that. But it was a turbocharger for the Pontiac 400. So they bought the HO Racing Turbo Force kit and installed it on 8 of those Macho TAs. And out of those 8, 7 of them were 4-speeds. 1 was an automatic. My customer has the automatic. He sent it to me. The car did not have the Turbo Force kit installed on it. It was in the trunk, and it had a 67 400 in the car because the original 400 that was in it had blown up. Something happened to it. It wasn't in the car anymore. We got it on a pallet, and it looked like it came off the Titanic. It was done, and it wasn't even numbers matching. So my theory is that this car did not. I think when it arrived brand new at Meckham Pontiac, I think the motor was actually removed and replaced with another 78 non-W72. It was actually the base 78 557 block 400. I think they already had a Turbo Force kit on that engine, and they just put it, just swapped it in there. So it didn't have a numbers matching engine with the car anyway. But we're building a W72 400, a 78 vintage, putting a Turbo Force kit on it, putting fuel injection on it. We're doing some stuff to it. It's actually going to be really neat. It's 40 over, forged pistons, custom ground cam. That's a lot of fun right now. That's one I'm really enjoying doing the build on. But we got more questions rolling in here. We got 18 people on, so let's go to that. Oh, let's see. Lee, why did you decide on 2500 stall? Why not more or less? Mainly, I was trying to fall somewhere in between. I didn't want to put too much stall in it that it would be a bear to drive on the street and around town. And I didn't want to put too little stall in it that it would want more performance. And I was kind of looking to see where it was building, where boost was coming in, which on my turbo was about 2500. It was starting to build boost. With the old converter, you have to understand, with the old converter, you could not stall it up high in the RPM range. So you actually had to take off, put your foot in it, and then by the time I got to 2500 RPM, it was already starting to build boost. So I was like, let's try 2500. Most of the time for my customers that are doing a street driven car, that they're not trying to race it or anything, I tell them to do 2200 because a 2500 can be a little annoying on the street. So I decided to go 2500, and I love it. I mean, mainly because I'm always trying to get as much performance out of it. And at the drag strip, it works great. It might work. Maybe it would work a little bit better with more stall in it at the track. But honestly, I wanted the best of both worlds. I don't mind having a little bit more stall in it on the street. I should put a transmission cooler on it because I think it's starting to heat up my my coolant because I'm just running the radiator transmission cooler. Because driving it around in the city, you're always stalling with it because it's in that range. It's below that 2500 RPM. Brent, is there a link or video for something for setting up the 4-wheel disc brakes on my 81? My brakes are soft. Maybe this should be another live, or maybe I should make a video. It's very hard to explain, but something that I did notice about rear disc brakes on these cars when you're trying to do it. So everybody talks, it was always known that you had to set the parking brake in order to get the pistons to ratchet out in the rear to get the brake pedal better. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes it doesn't ratchet out enough and stay out. The pistons don't stay out. You try to ratchet them out, but then they just get sucked right back in. My cousin has a Camaro, and he bought rear disc brake calipers and brackets off of a rear end that I had for his Camaro. And then he bought new calipers. Well, I'd never seen this before, But in the caliper box was this instructions, these instructions on how to adjust the brake pads. Because what happens is you have the lever on the back of the caliper, and that's for the parking brake. And it's got a hexagon hole in it to go around a hex-shaped bolt, or not a bolt, but a shaft coming out the back of the caliper, and that's got the threads cut in it to move the piston out for the parking brake. That's why you have a right and a left caliper. Even though the calipers are staggered and the castings are the same, you could put the right and left. You could switch them back and forth. It's that one has a reverse cut thread on it for the parking brake. So what ends up happening is we had one apart. Me and my cousin had one of these things apart, and there is a lot of stuff going on inside there. But there's basically like a piston inside of a piston, and it's hard to explain, but it's said in the instructions that if you can't get the lever in the correct position to allow it to apply the parking brake and fully release because there's stops cast into the caliper, if you can't get it to fully release, you want to change the position of that arm. Well, if you try to go to the next flat on that hex-headed hole, it's going to be in the way wrong position. But technically, what's supposed to happen is that shaft coming out the back of the caliper is supposed to turn independent from the actual piston itself. And they talked about like wedging a screwdriver into the brake pad, between the brake pad and the rotor, so that that shaft sticks out the way it should, and that you were supposed to turn that, and that you could turn it to where it would spin independent from the piston, and then you can kind of clock that hex bolt to put the lever where you wanted it. But what happens a lot of times is that I saw how that's supposed to work inside there, and it's got like this rubber lip seal inside of a piston. Sometimes it gets stuck, and you can't get it to rotate. Plus, every time you're trying to rotate it and get it into that position, it's trying to move the bolt in. It's trying to screw itself in there. So you got to have something to keep it from getting sucked in there. I found that I can actually put, I'm going to probably get this wrong, a 14 millimeter wrench on the back of there, and then put the nut on there that would retain the lever. Once I do that, tighten down the nut, then I can actually move the hex-shaped bolt into a different position and then try again. Once you've got that, and you've got it to where it just about hits the stop of the fully released position, and you still have just a slight drag on the brake pads, it works awesome. Then the pedal feels amazing. But like I said, it's so hard to try to describe to you how to do it. I'd love to make some kind of a tool to use on there, rather than trying to bolt my 14 millimeter wrench on it. Because the wrench can only go so far before it hits something like the shock or the axle tube or something. So I'd like to make some kind of a tool to use for that. But good question. We haven't really talked about the rear disc brakes on these cars. Let's see. Paul Johnson, we use 93 octane only. Yes, bottle is full. Okay. I think you might be making a bit too much boost. It might be what's going on. And also, test to make sure that the water, and this is for Paul Johnson, sorry. Test to make sure that the water injection is working and that it's not clogged. Usually it doesn't, but you can actually pull off the blue connector on the pressure switch and touch it to the pin that's bent over that you don't use. You got to have the key on when you do it. Just turn the key on, take the air cleaner lid off, pull that blue connector, touch it to the other one, and it should run the pump, and you should see it spray. Oh, Big Tex, you have an 80. Okay. Well, I can do some stuff to an 80. I like doing performance stuff to the 80s. It's a little bit easier than the 81s with the computer. Tommy, I feel the same way about the brakes on my four-wheel disc. I have had them bled and adjusted a bunch of times, and they just don't feel. You don't like the feel at all. Yeah, it's common with these cars. Is there a complete replacement kit to replace the front and rear disc brakes to a modern system? Good question, Tommy, because that brings up currently a car that I'm working on right now. Customer bought a complete Willwood disc brake setup, and It was expensive. I didn't buy it. He bought it and shipped it to me. 13-inch rotors on the back. I think they're drilled and slotted. 4-piston calipers all the way around. It's got the separate rotor hub deal in the front. I haven't gotten to the front. In fact, I just unboxed the rears today, and we're going to see what that deal is. That should be pretty interesting. That might be an option. The Willwood system. I know there's another guy called Scarebird that makes some like he's using factory parts, OEM parts. He's not like not like stainless steel brakes or Willwood or anything like that. But I'll let you know how that goes with the Willwood system. Brakes, not brakes. Yes, I noticed how you did that, but I get it. I know what you're asking about. How much with labor? I will tell you this: the rear brake system alone on Summit Racing was $1,835, and that's got a parking brake mechanism inside the rotor hat. So it's like a little mini drum brake behind the brake rotor. That's your parking brake. They do have a more expensive option, and it's almost double the price, that has a little mini brake caliper that sits on top. And then you have your normal brake caliper to the side. The little brake caliper on the top is your parking brake. That one's a more expensive system, but that's just the rears. The fronts, I'm assuming, are probably around the same price in that $1,800, maybe $1,900 range. I think Summit was showing them around $1,900. So you're probably approaching $4,000 easily to do a complete revamp of the brakes. I don't even think that comes with a master cylinder. Now that I think about it, I don't even know if I got a master cylinder with this kit. I have to look, but it's pricey, but it's available. Yes, the nice one, $5,000. I don't know about the labor. The labor, we're going to see how long it takes me to do the labor. In the rear, the differential cover's got to come off, and you got to pull the axles out to get at the brackets on the axle tubes. So that's a little more involved. The fronts might be a little more straightforward because you just got to take the bearing nut off and take the hub, take the rotors off, and then just replace it with their stuff. So yeah, $5,000 plus the labor, that's probably about right. That sounds about right, somewhere in there. Especially if you're going to go with a new master cylinder too, and proportioning valve. Usually, I would probably recommend going with an adjustable proportioning valve with the little knob on it. I would probably do that instead. Then you can really dial in what you need to do. Now, do take note, they do have different diameter rotors, rotor packages. The package that this customer bought was the 13-inch rotors, which require a 17-inch rim, but he's already got 17-inch snowflakes on the car. So, and you could go even bigger. You can go 14-inch rotors, but then you need 18-inch rims. Tommy would love to hear that the total price might be a fun project. Yeah, I mean, we could let me see how this goes together. If what's interesting is that he's got the Hotchkiss suspension system that you have, Tommy, on your car, but his is the next one up that's got the subframe connectors and the tubular upper and lower control arms in the front. Oh, Brooke Pitt, you made it. Unfortunately, nothing ever just bolts on. Always some sort of adapting. True. So now you want to sell me bigger rims too, Tommy? I don't want to sell you bigger rims. All I'm saying is that if you decide to upgrade, you're going to have to put bigger rims on it probably. You want to put bigger rims on it. Oh, what else? It seems like we got quite a few people in here. You like that Hotchkiss Stage 1, huh? It does work pretty well. I think you were the first one to have it. Then somebody else, I installed one after that. I think it was shortly after your car left. I installed the Hotchkiss system. This is the third one that's getting installed. And like I said, this one's the next stage up. I think this is a stage 2 with the subframe connectors and everything. So the only thing I got left in my notes is something we could talk about, the options on some of these cars. So there's been some talk on Facebook Marketplace, on Facebook and some of the Trans Am groups about WS6 and rear disc brakes and was it an option, was it not an option, all this stuff. All I can, so this is what my knowledge is on some of this. You can't really say all turbo cars had WS6. Well, I know that's false because my car is not a WS6 car. And my car is an 81 Trans Am, and I've seen an 80 Formula that was non WS6. So you can't really assume that. You can't assume that all WS6 cars had rear disc brakes. Although I'm pretty sure WS6 came with rear disc brakes. There was the WS7 option, which gave you all the suspension goodies, but drum brakes on the back. Now, did I know for sure WS6 was not on the turbo cars as standard equipment. In fact, I just had an 80 Formula turbo here, 50,000 miles on it, that had an open rear end. It did not have a posi in the rear end. 308 gear, but it was open. And it was originally, and it had drum brakes, and it was a Rally 2 car. It had Rally 2 steel wheels on it rather than the turbo wheels, because the turbo wheel in 80 would have been a WS6 thing. Now, maybe the turbo wheel was an option. It could be that the turbo wheel was an option. But what else is interesting about that is it did not have a factory tach. Now, I got a feeling that might be a Formula thing, where the tach was an option. Maybe the Trans Am it was standard. I don't know. But that's the third Formula turbo that I've seen that had a clock instead of a tachometer. But yeah, it just goes to show, I mean, there's some oddly optioned stuff, and you don't want to confuse too much of the information that's out there. Some people like to ask, how rare is it for four-wheel disc? I don't know if it's all that rare, especially on a loaded up Trans Am, one that's got a lot of performance options to it. My car has rear disc. It's not WS6, but it does have rear disc because rear disc was an option that could be chosen separately. Brian O'Neill, I like my rims off the Skybird. I still need to paint them. Oh, you don't want to put them on your SE with blue rims, blue snowflakes? Lee, do you know the 81 master cylinder piston diameter? My bare brakes requires a 1-inch diameter piston. I don't know the piston diameter of that. I'm trying to think how I could find that out. Maybe you could find the specs from like some of the parts stores sometimes give the specs. I don't know what the diameter is of that. And 81 is different from 80. 81 has the aluminum body with the quick take-up master cylinder with the plastic reservoir. I don't know if the piston diameter would be different or not, but 81 has the aluminum and plastic. The 1980 has the big cast iron master cylinder with the metal lid with the wire that holds it on. Yeah, I wonder if like O'Reilly or something like that, or even Rock Auto or something, would actually tell you what the diameter of the piston was. Yeah, something. That would be kind of interesting. Oh, so we'll see if anybody else has some more questions. Oh, Brooke Pitt, PHS report comes with a lot of information regarding options. My 81 pace car came with a full report when I bought it. Yeah, it does. It does give a report. It does not give a build sheet though. Build sheet is like the end all tell all of what the car came equipped with. That's what, and I most of the time find them on top of the gas tank. That brings up another question. I read it somewhere where a lot of people think that the pace cars came fully equipped with every option, both 80 and 81s. I actually documented what did it have? 1,500 mile 80 pace car, no cruise control, came without cruise. In fact, it was dealer purchased in a box with a receipt in the trunk. They wanted to add it. But yeah, it was a no cruise control 80 pace car, and the rear window defogger or heated rear window, that was an option too. And of course, your radio options were available too. Not all of them have power antenna. Some do, some don't. Depends on which radio was in it. So yeah, there is a few options on pace cars. Mid-South 2-stroke. Was it possible to get a non-turbo with a shaker hood but with 15x7 turbo wheels. I saw a white 301 non-turbo, and the man said it came with the turbo wheels. Weird. That's what I'm thinking. I think that the turbo wheel was an option. It's funny you mentioned that because I think they did that for California. So when the turbo car came out, the turbo wheel was for the turbo car, but in 1980, the turbo was a 49 state engine. It did not pass California emission laws, so it could not be sold new in California. So yes, you were stuck with a non-turbo 301. Actually, a 305 Chevy, I think, was an option in California emissions cars, with a shaker hood in 80. And that brings up another thing that I'm curious about too. We'll get to in a second, but yes, I think they made the turbo wheel available since California couldn't get a turbo car. They couldn't sell a turbo car new, so they made the wheel as an option. So yeah, you could technically get shaker hood and turbo wheels. I mean, don't quote me on that, but I'm thinking that's what had happened. I read that somewhere. Let's see, Random Randy. Joe, what are your thoughts on a 4-speed swap versus the Turbo 350C Trans? Performance gains in a quarter mile? 4-speed swap, manual trans or overdrive? Before I answer your question, Randy. Ned Rocks, will you be attending any shows in the Chicago area in 2022? Most likely we'll be at the Indian Uprising. We do that one every year. That's in the beginning of August. It was in St. Charles. Now it's in McHenry. So we went to that last year, but we went on Sunday. So that's the only one I know of. And the Pontiac Museum has their car shows too. I don't know if I'll be making any of those or not. I'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens. But I'm always interested in seeing any local Pontiac shows for sure. Brook Pitt, mine does not have stereo boost and rear defogger. Okay. Yes, audio boost was the other option, the factory amplifier, which I had the joy of wiring in one of those up in an 80 pace car. If you're ever curious, if you have a factory service manual, like the dealership chassis manual, service manual, and you want to know where the wiring diagram is for the for the factory amplifier, it's way in the back under accessories. It's not in the electrical section. Brian, the turbine rim was on the 79 10th anniversary first. Yes, it was. Yep. It was only on the 10th anniversary cars. 15x8 and on that and the 80s. 79 and 80 had an 8-inch wide turbo rim, and then in 81 they narrowed it by half an inch, so it became a 7.5. Always be sure to measure or look, because a lot of times what happens is somebody has 3 8-inch wides and one 7.5-inch wide rim. So if you're ever shopping for turbo wheels, be aware of that. Now, the interesting thing is, if you did not get WS6 in 80, for sure in 81, I'm not 100% sure what they did in 80. But in 81, if you did not get WS6 on your Turbo Trans Am, it came with 7-inch snowflakes. Mine had 7-inch snowflakes originally from the factory in gold, because it is an SE. But the person that I bought it from, the owner of the 301 garage for him, put 8-inch turbo rims on it from an 80. So yeah, there's that. I did come across, I almost bought it. Somebody had for sale in Illinois a white 80 turbo car with red interior, red hood bird, and Rally 2s. That was actually, it didn't look bad. Oh, manual T10, Randy. Okay. A lot of people ask me that. It depends. Is there a performance gain? Possibly, depending on which transmission you go with. There's so many different first gear ratios when it comes to manual transmissions. I mean, you have the Super T10 that's always been used in the Trans Ams, later Trans Ams, I should say, later second gens, which usually had like a 240 first gear, 243 or something like that. An interesting one is in 81 with the 305 Chevy, both the Camaro and the Trans Am Firebird. The 4-speed, the Super T10 in 81 had a 342 first gear. And that would be interesting. There was a guy in Canada that actually built a turbo car with that transmission years ago. But that would be interesting because the 342 first gear combined with the 308s in the rear would give you a lot of acceleration off the start. And then you would still have your 308s because the fourth gear in a manual transmission, like a Super T10 or whatever, is just 1-to-1 ratio. It's the same as third gear in a Turbo 350 automatic. So you're really not gaining an overdrive or anything like that, but you're gaining a lower set of gear ratios plus an extra gear so you can split it up a little bit more. I know some Saginaw transmissions came with really low first gears, like 350 first gear and stuff like that. The benefit of doing that is technically you could go the other way in the rear axle. So you could have like a ridiculously low first gear, which are manual trans, and then put like 273s in the rear to get the RPM down in fourth gear. Performance gain, I don't know if there would be one or not because you're always going to lose a little bit when you're shifting. um, but it'd be a lot of fun. I think it'd be a heck of a lot of fun to drive. I just don't know if it's really a performance gain going with a manual trans. Tommy, there was a 79 10th anniversary, 79 anniversary 66, which has the shaker hood, later turbo wheels in silver. Those are getting really expensive. Yeah, the 79 10th anniversary cars are really climbing in price, especially a 400 4-speed car. Because if you got a 10th anniversary car in 79 that was an automatic, it had the Oldsmobile 403 in it. But yeah, Brian O'Neill, your SE has 8s on the rear and 7.5s up front on your turbo wheels. Tommy, I think I showed you pictures in the past about this fact in the past. Pontiac stole the design for the turbo wheel from the Porsche 935 rims. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, that definitely. I always wonder. Everybody's making these like 17-inch, 18-inch snowflakes right now. What would a 17-inch turbo wheel look like? I don't know if I'd like it. I don't know. It might look kind of weird. A little too much dish going on. Oh, Brian was asking Randy if his car was an 80 or 81. I don't believe there was a manual in 80. You'll have to find a specific console. Yeah, there's no manual transmission Trans Am in 80. There was no option for one. They were all automatics. 81, the 4-speed came back. It came with the 305 Chevy. It basically was the Camaro drivetrain, including the exhaust. There was no splitter tips on the 305 cars for the Trans Am. It said 5.0 on the shaker hood. But at 81 4-speed console is a 1-year only console because there is no map pocket in it. It's completely molded closed because the computers are back there because it was computer controlled. But wow, hour 17, but we still got 17 people on. That's amazing. I guess the only other thing I was going to address for you guys is that I'll probably have some used parts available soon that I'll probably start advertising. I know for sure that I have WS6 rear sway bar, rear leaf springs that are going to be available or are currently available. I might have a complete rear disc brake setup for one of these cars. We're talking caliper in good working order too. Calipers, brackets. What else would there be for the rear? Yeah, it would probably be about it. I do have a really nice stock turbo that was taken in trade. It's rebuilt, never been installed. It doesn't have any ceramic coating on it or anything like that, but we'll be selling it at a reasonable price for anybody out there that's just looking for a replacement. Trying to think what else is probably going to be available. I don't know. Probably be cleaning house a little bit. I got a stock downpipe that's in pretty nice shape. Pretty low mileage unit, but who really wants a stock downpipe? Maybe, Brian, maybe a 79 manual console, but it will have the cutout for the map pocket. Yep, it will. 79 console would be the same from, it would go back pretty far. 79 is the last year for the map pocket console. 80, well, 80 is an automatic. There's no manual 80 console. So, well, I think we can wrap it up. if nobody else has any other questions. I think there was one on Facebook. Actually, let me check that real quick on the Facebook page. Somebody did ask a question before. Oh, let me get there. Who cuts my hair? Lee, you asked who cuts my hair. Marissa cuts my hair. Let's see. David Ward had asked, why is information so scarce about how to improve the performance of a stock 301 turbo, 80 or 81? Well, that's a good question. Why is it really scarce? Maybe it's just because there's not a lot of people that have these cars and this engine, and there's not a lot of people that work on them. Like, take for instance the 400 cars. You got the earlier cars. The Pontiac 400 has been around for a really long time, and there's been so many different people out there that have done modifications to them and gotten more performance out of them. Nunzi out in New York, and Butler Performance, and all these different places. And I mean, it's just been around. There's so many proven ways to improve it. Plus, it works on with just your typical hot rodding stuff. Oh, we put aluminum intake on it, and a bigger cam in it, and free flowing exhaust and headers and whatever, and it makes more power. The turbo cars don't have that option. The turbo car is a completely different animal. It doesn't respond to those typical hot rodding tricks. You just got to, it's a little more creative. And I think a lot of people just didn't understand it, didn't know what to do with it. It was new technology that nobody really cared. And it sat dormant from the performance side for quite a while. And I mean, not saying that nobody had ever done it until now. The people that did successfully make performance improvements on them were few and far between, and maybe there just wasn't an outlet as to how to announce how to do it, and the fact that it just wasn't that popular. I mean, the turbo motor just didn't have that strong of a following. There wasn't a whole lot of them produced. So yeah, I mean, that's probably why there's just not a ton of information out there. But if you're looking to do stuff with it, I can help you. I still don't know everything about it and how to make the most performance out of it. I'm still learning too. But just from what I've been doing since 2015, basically, there's been some improvements on what to do with it. It's just that information is just not all out there. There's not a ton of that information out there. I guess that kind of answers the question. Oh, what else we got coming in? Oh, Tommy, what is custom Hurst shifter console? Yeah, that was a tough one to find. It's a Hurst quarter stick for an F-body console. That was that shifter was discontinued in 2007, and Hurst never re-released it or anything. And it was quite the feat to try to find one for you there, Tommy. You could buy the plate new from eBay. Somebody has a whole stockpile of brand new top plates for it, but you can't find the shifter. Big text. Keep the live chats and videos coming. They are so informative. Never stop doing them. I look forward to them every time I get a notification. I'll definitely get with you next week and get the car to you. Sounds great. Appreciate it. Thank you. Brian O'Neill, because there's only one TTA. That's why no one else knows what to do with these cars. Brooke Pitt, not scarce. Just go to the TTA websites. Oh, you guys. Airboss 99. Not to mention they were only built for 2 years. Yep. However, I read an article that it was a huge step forward and not really understood. Such an interesting engine, though. That's what I like about it. Is it's an interesting engine. I really like the engineering part of it. It's like they really had to think things through to make this engine. At least the turbocharging side of it. The 301 itself, it's like, come on, guys. Don't look on Facebook groups for 301 performance advice. A lot of bashing ignorance. Yeah, Randy, that does happen. You're going to get that. It's unfortunate, but I've often said it in the past. It's like somebody that wants to bash the 301 turbo. First question is, did you ever own one, or are you just going off of what everybody else says? If you did own one, odds are something was wrong, because now I'm not saying it's a tire smoker. We all know that. But even, I mean, I had a 16,000 mile turbo formula that I just sold, and it was untouched. The mufflers had rotted off. Somebody tried to put turbo mufflers on it when it was new, and then they had rotted off. So it still had its factory cat on it, still has factory downpipe. Everything was untouched, and it just, the mufflers were missing. Um, it ran well. I mean, I almost thought something was wrong with it, like some kind of ringer, because it actually ran pretty well and had good performance. And I'm like, the people that say, "Oh, it's such a turd, it was so slow, it couldn't get out of its own way." Did you have problems like my customer in California that sent me the 81 Daytona? Was there a major issue that was a problem, that it couldn't go up a hill? That is going to make a big difference. So if it's not running properly, I often said it's a house of cards. You got to have everything working in unison. All the special parts have to be doing their job in order for that car to run right. You take one of them away and the whole deal falls apart, and then it doesn't run correctly. And of course it's not gonna perform. Mid-South 2-strokes. Heard a rumor people would blow up the 301, and either dealer or shops were putting 400s in practically new cars back in the day. That may be just a story though. Possibly. It possibly could have happened. You know, when I was working at the dealership, I worked for an Oldsmobile Chevrolet dealership. And the first week that I was there, first day I was there, the heavy engine guy that worked next to me was actually putting a 350 Olds engine in a 442, like an 86 442 that had a 307 in it. And something had happened to the 307. The kid, I think it was a kid that owned it, wanted to, pay to have the motor replaced with a GM crate engine. And for extra money, they put a 350 in it for him, which I thought that was pretty interesting. It's not like the car was under warranty or anything. It was already, pretty old. Thanks for all the great info. Merry Christmas. Looking forward to my TTA hoodie. Great job, Laris. Thank you, Laris. Love the 301 Turbo, by the way, but have heard diehard Pontiac guys just not even touch the conversation. I always thought they were really cool. Owning a TTA is a very unique experience and a fun story to explain to people who walk up to me at the beach and ask me about it every single time I take it out. Tommy. Yep, I know. Oh, is it time? Oh.
No, I just mentioned if people want to have hoodies.
Okay.
That they need to contact us so we can get like a.
Yeah. Yeah, I was putting that out there. I was just informed. The people that want hoodies, t-shirts, whatever, get in touch with us. We'll get a list going. Maybe we'll keep it open for like a week or so. And we'll get a whole list so that we can get them all made at once. So yeah, get in touch with us about the apparel. Yes, Tommy, that is kind of exciting to be able to tell somebody, in fact, so my customer's car that I'm working on right now, that we're doing the big brakes and suspension and everything, it was in storage. It was in a storage facility, and I had the tow truck driver come out with the flatbed to pick it up, and it had a car cover on it. And I peel off the cover, and it says Turbo Trans Am right on the spoiler. And he's like, Turbo Trans Am? And I'm like, yeah, it's turbocharged. And then had to explain, only for 2 years that this car was offered with a turbo. But it is pretty exciting, they have to explain that to somebody. It just baffles them, especially when you tell them it's a V8. Brian O'Neill, TTA Joe doing 12-second quarter mile. That's way faster than the old Super Duty 455 back in the day. The magazine had the Super Duty doing 14.5. Yeah, but it might have been spinning the crap out of the tires doing it. No one knows what the heck a TTA is anywhere I take it. Yeah, the hood scoop throws them off too, because they're like, isn't it supposed to have the thing sticking out of the hood? But wow, I think this is like the longest live that we've had. But like I said, I mean, you guys are still here, and if you're still asking questions, I don't mind. But so yes, to recap for those people that weren't on right away at the beginning, we're offering gift certificates now. So get your gift certificate. They're good for 1 year, any dollar amount. hit us up for one of those. We can actually scan it and email it to you, so we don't have to send it in the mail. So yeah, get your gift certificate, and I think I'm going to wrap it up from here. Tell Heather thank you for staying up late. She was making cookies, Christmas cookies. But yeah, we'll end it there. So Merry Christmas to everyone. Happy New Year. And we will catch you next time. So thanks.